Hello everyone, I'm Dennis. Welcome to Villa Kenworthy. Today we're going to be making one of my very favorite things, venison backstrap. As I mentioned, today we're going to be making venison backstrap. It is one of my favorite items to make. We also have a sponsor for the video today. I would like to say thank you to Lori Hackman. She's the proprietor of the Oilery in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. It's a wonderful place. They have a bunch of great products. You can taste everything. You can check things out. They don't mind answering questions. I popped in there a few weeks ago and Lori was kind enough to give me a few products to try for a new recipe I was creating. So let's get into it. I'll show you these products. I'll show you how I use them. And then you can go and check it out and create this on your own. The first step in the process is to prepare the meat. This is a portion of venison backstrap from a deer I shot last year. Hunting season's coming up, and I know that this right here is the cut of meat that almost all hunters are looking for. So you see this membrane right here? We want to remove this and have a nice clean piece of meat. Venison is low in fat because the meat doesn't have marbled fat running through it. So we want a nice, clean, beautiful piece of meat to start with for this recipe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by trimming it up. We have a nice edge right here where I can start to get underneath the silver skin or the membrane. I don't want to take off too much because I don't want to lose any of this meat. So I'm just going to start slow, and then I'm going to guide the edge of the knife. You want the tip of this knife to be right up against the silver skin. You don't want it to cut through it. You just want to use the skin to guide it so that you can pull that off. If we cooked it with this on, it'd be really chewy and really tough. And this is a very tender piece of meat. Set that aside. Then I'll start off, I'll flip this around, and I'll try to get that same edge . Now once I have a good portion of the membrane that's pulled back, I'll often flip the meat over. And then I will get my knife in between the meat and the membrane, and then I'll fillet it kind of like you do a fish. So I set the blade right in here on top, and then I'll press down, and then I press the blade down on top of the membrane without cutting through it. And then I just slide it back. If you've ever filleted a fish, it's very, very similar. Now I have a nice clean piece of meat. I've got this membrane off. I don't have a whole lot of meat left on the membrane, so I want to conserve as much of this as possible. Set this aside. I'll do a little bit more trimming just to get all the little tough pieces off. We have our venison backstrap prepped and ready to go. It's trimmed. It's a beautiful cut of meat. A lot of you might be thinking that, wow, this meat is really dark. If you've never had venison, often the color of it is much darker than what you'll see with beef, and sometimes it even looks purple. That is not a problem. That is normal for this meat. Our meat is ready. The next step is going to be to make the marinade. Our marinade is very simple. We start with 1 cup of water, juice from 1 orange, a half cup of olive oil, not the garlic infused olive oil. I fear that the flavor would be a little too robust for the marinade. We also have the zest from 1 orange. I use the same orange, by the way. We'll put that in here. About a tablespoon of rosemary. I use dried because it's what I have in the kitchen. And then we're going to go with that wonderful balsamic vinegar from the Oilery. It has a wonderful sweet aroma. It kind of smells almost like prune juice to me a little bit, but it's got a quality that's much better. So we'll use about a 1/4 cup think that's enough. Once I have all the ingredients in my cup, I'm going to use my immersion blender and I'm going to emulsify this concoction, and then we'll use that to marinate our backstrap. You want to make sure that you place the immersion blender all the way down. You can make a big mess doing this. It's going to get a little bit loud. We have our meat ready. We have our marinade ready. Now we're going to put them together in a Ziploc bag. This is a 1 gallon freezer bag. This will make sure that it doesn't leak everywhere. So what we want to do is get as much of the air out of this bag as possible. I'm going to use a Ziploc seal and press it all the way down, leaving about an inch open. And then I'm going to roll it and push all the air out. If you'll notice, I didn't use any salt or pepper in this portion of the recipe. What I'm trying to do is get the aromatics to impart upon the meat and give them a flavor on top of the flavor profile we're going to see from the steak seasoning that we're going to finish this with. We'll put this in the fridge and it needs to rest for about 20 hours, and then I'll show you the next step in the process. So our venison backstraps are marinating overnight. It's been a little over 20 hours. My target time was 20 hours. I'll show you the next step in the process. We're going to set it up to go another 24 hours in the fridge on a rack, and I'll show you how I do that. I always like to check the marinade and see how everything smells the next day. It smells absolutely wonderful. I can really get a sense of the balsamic vinegar in there and that orange peel, and the rosemary comes through a little bit as well. Rosemary will add a little bit of bitterness to it because we put it in dry. It comes through great with the aromatics after we cook it. I'm just going to pull that out. I'm going to set it on some paper towel. I would like to dry it off. I don't want to have it wet and covered in the marinade anymore. That has done its job. Pat this dry. And we'll dry it off a little bit more. As you'll notice, the color has lightened a little bit. That is due to the marinade. The citric acids and stuff like that have a tendency to affect the meat, but it's going to be the effect we want, so that's not a problem. Next step, I'm going to take and I'm going to square off the ends a little bit. For my cutlets, I don't want the marinated ends. I just want that around the ring. So I'm going to take and square this off. And you see we have that nice colored meat still in on the inside. These right here will be chef snacks when we get done. And again, this looks wonderful. That is just what we're looking for. I want to take and cut these in maybe 1 inch thick cutlets. They're going to be like miniature steaks, similar to what you'd think about filet mignon, but not quite as big. So we have 7 nice cutlets or steaks here. I'm going to take and place these on this cookie rack, and it's over a sheet pan to catch any drippings. I'm going to place these on here, and we're going to stick these in the fridge to dry age overnight until tomorrow. It's not necessarily a true dry age because they won't be taking on any of those really intense flavors that extended dry aging does. But I don't want the meat to have a whole bunch of moisture right now due to that marinade. And this will set them up to grill and get that nice crispy crust. So we're going to take and put these in the fridge just like this overnight. It's got air that can circulate through the bottom and the top. And we're going to let them dry out just a little bit. Don't worry, they'll still be nice and juicy inside. And here we have our venison backstrap. This has been in the fridge for just over 24 hours. I do that so that I can dry out the meat just a little bit because I want to get a nice salty crispy crust whenever I cook it. Before I get into preparing our meat, I want to get the stove and the oven ready to go. I need to set the oven to 200 degrees and get that warmed up ahead of time. I've got a cast iron skillet that I'm going to be cooking the venison backstrap in. So I'm going to get that set up to a medium-high heat. And then I have a small saucepan that we're going to heat up the cherry balsamic sauce. I'm going to set that to medium. And we're just going to pat each one of these dry. I've got a plate here with some paper towel. I'm just going to set that on there and pat it dry on each side just a little bit more. And I'll do that for each one of these. So here we have our cherry balsamic sauce. This is the product I got from the oilery. I'm going to take and put a couple ounces into this saucepan. Probably only need to heat it up for a few minutes. I don't want to burn it. While I'm heating up the oven and our pans, I'm going to prepare the meat. You want this process to go very quickly, as you don't want salt to sit on the meat for very long because it'll draw out too much moisture. This is where I'm going to use that garlic infused olive oil I got from the oilery. I'm going to take and just drizzle some of this olive oil over each piece. And I'll rub that in. Now I take some of my homemade steak seasoning. Watch out for another video where I show you how I make this. And I'm just going to sprinkle some liberally all over each one of the pieces of meat, and then we'll flip it over and we'll do exactly the same thing. And by this point, the pan should be nice and hot, and we'll go straight from here onto the pan. Now that the meat is seasoned and ready to go, we want to go straight to the pan. All right, as you can see, the pan is smoking. It is good and hot. I do have my range hood operating to draw all of this air outside. I'm going to put just a little bit more of this garlic oil right on the pan. And then we're going to place our meat on. This is not going to take very long to cook. You want to cook it over really high heat. We'll let these cook for about a minute on each side. All right, now that they've cooked hot and fast, we'll remove them from this heat and we will place them in the oven to finish off for about 3 minutes, and then they are ready for table service. So I left these in the oven for about 2 minutes and then I pulled them. I've placed them on this plate, and now you want to let them rest for 5 to 6 minutes. That'll let the juices reincorporate and let them finish cooking. You only need to cook these for about 4 minutes total to get a good medium rare with the small cut of meat that it is, so be careful not to overcook it. Next step, we will plate it and we will put the sauce on top, and then it's ready to eat. Our backstrap has rested and now it's time to plate. And we'll take some of the cherry balsamic sauce, and I'm just going to put a little bit on each one. I don't think they're going to require a whole lot, so that the saltiness and the sweetness of this right here will blend right together. And there we have it. I'm going to go and enjoy this for dinner, and I will let you know how it tastes. And that's how I make venison backstrap. I've been using a variation of this recipe for a few years now. The cherry balsamic sauce is a new addition, and I will say that the flavors came out absolutely wonderful. I would highly recommend any of these products. Check out the oilery in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. I imagine they do have a web-based presence as well. If you have any other questions, please let me know. If you have something else you would like to see, please drop it in the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe, and check out my other video, and I'll show you how I made that steak seasoning. Thank you.